If you walk away now, you'll live, but you'll never forget her face. The neon lights flickered above Dock 17, casting broken reflections across the oil-slick floor as Lucas Hale tightened his grip on a rusted wrench, the metal cold against his palm. 12 hours into a double shift, grease on his hands, mind numb. He should have been thinking about rent, about sleep, about anything but the sound that cut through the hum of generators. A stumble, light but wrong, like someone who had already lost too much. He turned before he could stop himself, and there she was, leaning against the hull of a half-dismantled freighter, her skin catching the dim light in a way that didn't belong to this world, a soft blue with hints of violet beneath, like starlight trapped under glass, her breathing uneven but controlled, as if even weakness had rules where she came from. Lucas froze, because something in his chest remembered a moment years ago, a different alley, a different choice. One step backward that had haunted every quiet night since. The air shifted, not louder, just heavier, and his instincts, old, buried, but never gone, whispered that they weren't alone. He could leave, pretend he hadn't seen her, walk 20 yards to his truck and drive until this night became just another memory he refused to name. He almost did, his foot turning slightly, muscles ready to obey the safer path, the easier one, the one he knew too well. Then she lifted her head, and her eyes found his, not pleading, not desperate, just steady, like she had already accepted whatever came next. That was what broke him, not fear, not urgency, but that quiet acceptance. Lucas exhaled slowly, like he was pushing something out of himself, something old and cowardly, and stepped forward instead of back. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, more to himself than to her. But he kept moving, each step heavier than the last, each one louder in his mind than the clatter of tools around him. He shrugged off his worn jacket and draped it over her shoulders, the fabric swallowing the glow of her skin, hiding what made her different, or at least trying to. She flinched at the contact, then stilled, her gaze sharpening as if reassessing him, recalculating. Lucas didn't meet her eyes this time, focusing instead on the faint tremor in his own hands as he adjusted the collar, making sure it covered her. "You can stand?" he asked, voice low, controlled, the way it used to be when control was the only thing that kept people alive. She didn't answer right away, and in that pause, the dock seemed to hold its breath with them. Finally, she nodded once, precise, deliberate. Lucas swallowed, then stepped to her side, not touching, not yet, just close enough that if she fell, he would catch her, and for the first time in a long time, he made a choice he couldn't take back. The wind outside howled against the metal walls, a low, constant hum that vibrated through Lucas Hale's bones as he guided her step by step across the cluttered workshop floor, every tool and loose cable suddenly feeling like a trap waiting to trip her. She moved carefully, her weight barely touching the ground, but he could feel the strain in the slight hitch of her breath, the way her fingers tightened around the edge of a workbench when she thought he was not looking. "Easy," he said quietly, keeping his voice steady, grounding, the way he used to when things went wrong, when panic only made everything worse. She glanced at him then, her eyes sharper now, clearer, studying him not as a stranger, but as something she had not yet defined. "You speak as if you have done this before," she said, her voice low, melodic, but edged with something else, something that sounded like suspicion. Lucas let out a small breath through his nose, almost a laugh, but not quite. "I have helped people walk before," he replied, leaving out the part where sometimes he had not helped at all. They reached the back room, a narrow space with a single flickering overhead light and a reinforced door that hummed faintly as it sealed shut behind them. The air felt different here, quieter, insulated from the outside world, but not safe. Not really. Nothing felt safe anymore once you knew what to listen for. Lucas crossed to a battered storage locker and pulled out a clean thermal blanket, shaking it loose before draping it over her shoulders on top of his jacket. She did not resist this time. Instead, she watched him with an intensity that made him shift slightly under her gaze. "Why?" she asked suddenly. The word was simple, but it carried weight, expectation, something deeper than curiosity. Lucas paused, his hand still resting on the edge of the locker, grease smeared across his knuckles. He could have said anything, Something easy, something that sounded good. But the truth was heavier than that. Because I was there, he said finally, his voice quieter now, almost lost under the hum of the door. She tilted her head slightly, as if that answer did not fit whatever logic she carried. That is not sufficient, she said. My people do not act without purpose. Lucas met her eyes then, really met them, and for a moment the room felt smaller, like the walls had closed in around just the two of them. Maybe that is the difference, he said. Silence followed, not empty, but full, like something was shifting between them that neither fully understood yet. Then she stepped closer, just a few inches, but enough that he could feel the faint warmth radiating from her through the layers of fabric. Her hand lifted slowly, hesitating in the air before resting lightly against his chest, right over his heartbeat. Lucas stiffened, not pulling away, not moving at all. Her eyes softened, just slightly, as if she was listening to something only she could hear. You shielded me, she said again, softer this time, almost like she was confirming it to herself. You chose to stand between me and those who pursue me. Lucas opened his mouth to respond, to explain, to deny the weight she was placing on that moment, but the words did not come, because deep down, he knew she was right. He had chosen, and choices, once made, had a way of rewriting everything that came after. The hum of the sealed door deepened, almost like a warning, and Lucas felt it before he heard it. A faint shift in the air pressure, a subtle vibration through the metal floor that did not belong to his shop. His eyes flicked toward the far wall where an old sensor panel blinked weakly, its amber light stuttering like it was trying to speak but had forgotten how. We are not alone, she said quietly, her hand still resting over his chest, her voice calm in a way that made his pulse feel louder by comparison. Lucas nodded once, already moving, his body slipping into a rhythm he had not used in years, scanning exits, distances, weight of objects, everything measured in feet and seconds. Back room has one way in, he said, stepping past her and reaching for a manual override lever beside the door, reinforcing the seal with a heavy, metallic click. If they are looking, they will start wide, then tighten the circle. She watched him, not with fear, but with focus, like she was recalculating him all over again. You have done this before, she said, not a question this time. Lucas did not answer, because the answer was already in the way his hands moved without hesitation, in the way his breathing slowed instead of quickened. He crossed to a cluttered workbench and cleared a small space, setting down a portable scanner, its screen flickering to life with a low blue glow. Stand still, he said, softer now, almost careful. She hesitated for half a second, then obeyed, her posture straight despite the fatigue pulling at her shoulders. The scanner passed slowly over her side, emitting a soft pulse of light, and Lucas frowned slightly at the readings, not because they were alarming, but because they were unfamiliar. You are not from any system I have worked with, he murmured. Your physiology does not match standard registry profiles. She studied him as he worked, her expression unreadable. I am not meant to be found, she replied. The words settled in the room, heavy with meaning. Lucas set the scanner down, wiping his hands on a cloth that was already stained from a dozen other repairs. Well, you were, he said quietly. Silence followed. But it was different now, less uncertain, more like two people standing on the edge of something neither had planned. Then the faintest sound reached them, not loud, not obvious, just a soft shift beyond the outer wall, like boots on metal, measured, patient. Lucas's jaw tightened slightly. They are close, he said. She did not look toward the sound, her eyes still fixed on him instead. Then you should leave, she said. You have fulfilled your action. Your survival probability increases if you disengage now. Lucas let out a slow breath, almost amused despite the tension. You talk like a machine, he said. Everything is numbers, outcomes. Her gaze did not waver. It is how my people endure. Lucas nodded once, then reached past her to grab a small handheld tool, its weight familiar in his palm. Yeah, he said softly. Well, humans are not that good at leaving things behind. She watched him for a long moment, something shifting behind her eyes, something softer, less calculated. Then she spoke again, her voice quieter than before. You did not leave before, she said. Lucas paused, just for a second, the memory hitting him harder than the distant footsteps ever could. No, he admitted. I did not, and for the first time since she had arrived. Her hand did not move away from his chest, as if she had decided that answer mattered more than anything waiting outside. The footsteps outside slowed, not stopping, just changing rhythm, like whoever was out there had already mapped the space and was now choosing how to approach it. And Lucas felt the shift in his spine before he consciously registered it. That quiet tightening that meant time was running thinner than it sounded. He moved toward the back console, fingers brushing over worn switches until a hidden panel slid open with a soft mechanical sigh, revealing a narrow maintenance corridor barely 3 feet wide, dark except for a faint strip of emergency lighting running along the floor. There is another way out, he said, not looking at her as he grabbed a compact power pack and clipped it to his belt. Movements efficient, practiced. It will take us to the lower loading docks, maybe 50 yards from here. She did not move immediately, her gaze fixed on him as if weighing more than just the path he offered. You are still choosing to remain with me, she said, her tone quieter now, less analytical, more certain. Lucas exhaled, glancing toward the sealed door where the faint shadow of movement passed across the bottom edge, just enough to confirm what they both already knew. I am choosing not to leave you behind, he corrected, his voice steady but softer than before. She stepped closer again, the blanket shifting slightly around her shoulders, and for a moment the noise outside seemed distant, irrelevant, like the world had narrowed to the space between them. On my world, she said slowly. To stand between another and those who pursue them is not temporary. It is not situational. It is a declaration. Lucas let out a quiet breath, almost a tired smile that never fully formed. Yeah, well, on my world, it is usually just called doing the right thing. Her eyes searched his face, as if that answer did not satisfy whatever truth she was trying to confirm. And if doing the right thing costs you your life? She asked. Lucas paused, the question settling heavier than the sounds outside, heavier than the memory that flickered behind his eyes. He had been asked something like that once before, in a different place, with different consequences. And he had chosen wrong. His grip tightened slightly on the power pack before he clipped it into place. Then at least it costs me for the right reason, he said quietly. The corridor light flickered once, casting a brief shadow across his face, and when it steadied again, something in her expression had changed, something that looked less like calculation and more like understanding. She stepped into the narrow opening, turning slightly as she passed him, her shoulder brushing his chest just enough to make him aware of how close they were standing. Then you do not yet understand what you have done, she said, her voice almost a whisper now. Lucas frowned slightly, following her into the corridor, pulling the panel closed behind them with a muted click that sealed off the room, the dock, and whatever waited there. I protected someone, he replied, moving ahead to lead the way, his boots echoing softly in the confined space. That is all. She stopped for a fraction of a second. Behind him, just long enough that he felt the absence of her movement, then continued, her steps matching his pace. No, she said, her tone calm but absolute. You chose me. Lucas did not respond right away, his focus on the dim path ahead, on the turns he knew by memory, on the distance measured in feet and seconds. But her words lingered, pressing against something he had tried to keep buried. After a moment, he spoke, quieter than before. It was not like that. The corridor narrowed further, forcing them closer, shoulder to shoulder as they moved through the tight space. The air warmer here, thicker, carrying the faint scent of metal and old wiring. She did not look at him, but her voice reached him clearly. It does not matter how you define it, she said. What matters is that you did not leave. Lucas swallowed, the words hitting deeper than he expected, because that was the part that had always defined him, the part he had tried to outrun, and now, with each step forward, it felt like he was no longer running at all. The corridor bent sharply to the left, forcing Lucas to slow his pace as the ceiling dropped lower, pipes running overhead with a soft metallic ticking that echoed like a quiet countdown. And the air grew warmer, thicker, carrying the faint scent of coolant and dust that had not been disturbed in years. Saren moved beside him, without hesitation now, her steps more stable, her breathing more controlled. But there was something different in the way she carried herself, less guarded, as if the narrow space had stripped away the distance she had kept between them. "How far?" she asked, her voice steady but softer than before. "About 40 feet. Lucas replied, glancing ahead where the emergency strip lights flickered unevenly, casting shadows that shifted with each step. "There is a ladder at the end, leads up to the lower dock level." She nodded once, absorbing the information quickly, then added, "And after that?" Lucas hesitated for a fraction of a second, not because he did not have an answer, but because none of the answers felt certain. "After that, we keep moving," he said finally. "Find a way off this station, or at least somewhere harder to track." She studied him again, that same quiet intensity returning, but this time it carried something else beneath it, something closer to trust. "You speak in uncertainty," she said, "yet you continue forward without hesitation." Lucas let out a faint breath, almost a tired laugh. "That is kind of the definition of moving forward," he said. "You do not wait until things are certain." They reached the base of the ladder, its metal rungs worn smooth from years of use, and Lucas tested it with a quick pull before gesturing upward. "You first," he said. Saren paused, looking at the ladder, then back at him. "You place yourself between me and danger, yet you now place me ahead of you," she observed. Lucas shrugged slightly. "Because if something is waiting up there, I would rather know sooner than later," he replied. She held his gaze for a moment longer, then began to climb, her movements controlled despite the strain, the blanket shifting slightly, but staying wrapped around her shoulders. Lucas followed a step behind, close enough to catch her if she slipped, his focus shifting between her and the opening above. When they reached the top, Saren pushed the hatch open slowly, just enough to peer through, her body still and listening. The dock beyond was quieter than expected, the usual hum of machinery muted, lights dimmed to a low glow that stretched long shadows across the floor. She climbed through, then turned, extending her hand without hesitation. Lucas took it, pulling himself up, and for a brief second their grip held, firm, deliberate, before he released it and scanned the space around them. "This is not normal," he said quietly. "There should be more activity, more noise." Saren stepped closer to him, her voice lowering. "They have already moved ahead of us," she said. Lucas nodded slowly, the realization settling in. They were not being chased blindly. They were being guided, herded towards something. He exhaled, steadying himself. "Then we do not follow the path they expect," he said. He turned slightly, mapping the dock in his mind, measuring distances in feet, identifying blind spots and alternate routes. Saren watched him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she spoke again, softer than before. "You continue to adapt," she said, "even when the situation changes." Lucas glanced at her briefly, then back to the shadows ahead. "You do what you have to," he replied. She stepped closer, just enough that their shoulders nearly touched, her presence no longer distant but aligned with his. "On my world," she said quietly. "To choose someone in this way is not temporary." Lucas's jaw tightened slightly, not in rejection, but in the weight of what she was implying. He did not respond right away, his focus still outward, still scanning, but her words stayed with him, threading through his thoughts in a way he could not ignore. After a moment, he spoke, low and honest. "Then your world works differently than mine." Saren did not argue, did not press. She simply nodded once, as if accepting that difference without dismissing it. And for the first time since they entered the dock, neither of them stepped away, both standing in the same direction, facing whatever came next together. The dock stretched out in long, dim lines of steel and shadow, the overhead lights buzzing faintly as if they were struggling to stay awake. And Lucas felt the silence more than he heard it, the kind of silence that did not belong in a working port, the kind that meant someone had already decided how this night was supposed to end. He stepped forward slowly, each footfall measured in inches, his eyes tracking reflections along the polished floor, looking for movement that did not match the rhythm of the place. Saren moved with him now without needing direction, her pace matching his instinctively, her presence no longer something he had to account for, but something that aligned with him. "They are guiding us," she said quietly, her voice barely above the hum of the lights. Lucas nodded once, his jaw set. "Yeah," he replied. "But that does not mean we have to follow the script." He angled left instead of straight ahead, cutting between two stacked cargo crates that stood nearly 8 feet tall, their surfaces cold and smooth under the faint glow. Saren followed without question, though her eyes remained alert, scanning the upper walkways and distant platforms. "You change direction without signal," she observed. "You do not wait for confirmation." Lucas glanced back briefly, then forward again. "Because waiting gets you caught," he said. "You move first, figure it out after." They reached a narrow service ramp that sloped downward toward a secondary loading bay, the metal surface slightly damp, reflecting the light in broken patterns. Lucas slowed, crouching slightly as he reached the edge, his hand brushing the rail as he looked down the 30-foot incline. The lower level was darker, quieter, almost completely still. Too still. Saren stopped beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her through the layers between them. "This is the path they expect," she said. Lucas nodded. "Which means it is probably the wrong one," he replied. He straightened, stepping back from the ramp and turning his gaze upward instead, toward a network of overhead maintenance tracks that ran along the ceiling about 12 feet above the dock floor. Thin, narrow, not meant for regular foot traffic, but usable. "Up there," he said, pointing. Saren followed his line of sight, her eyes narrowing slightly as she assessed the distance and structure. "It is unstable," she noted. Lucas gave a small shrug. "So is everything else right now," he said. He moved toward a nearby support column, gripping a set of embedded footholds and pulling himself up with practiced ease, his muscles remembering the motion even if his mind wished they did not. Halfway up, he paused, glancing down at her. "Can you make it?" he asked. Saren did not answer with words. Instead, she stepped forward and climbed, her movements controlled, precise, faster than he expected given her condition earlier. When she reached him, their shoulders nearly touched on the narrow beam, both of them balancing carefully as the metal creaked softly under their combined weight. The dock below seemed farther away now, the shadows deeper, the silence heavier. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Saren turned her head slightly toward him, her voice low but clear. "You continue to choose paths that increase your risk," she said. Lucas let out a quiet breath, his eyes fixed ahead as he began to move along the beam, each step deliberate, heel to toe. "Yeah," he said. "That sounds about right." She studied him for a second longer, then moved. With him, her balance steady, her presence close. "On my world," she said. This would not be considered strategy. Lucas allowed the faintest hint of a smile to touch his expression, though it never fully formed. "On mine," he replied. "It is called not doing what everyone expects." She fell silent after that, but her hand shifted slightly, brushing against his arm for just a moment, not by accident, not by necessity, but by choice. And Lucas did not pull away, because somewhere between the shadows below and the narrow path ahead, he realized that this time, he was not moving alone. The beam trembled under their weight, a faint metallic shiver that ran through Lucas's boots and up his spine. Each step forward measured in inches as the open space below stretched out in silence. Too quiet, too still, like the entire dock was holding its breath for something neither of them could yet see. Lucas slowed, raising a hand slightly, not touching her, but signaling, and Saren matched him instantly, her movement syncing with his without hesitation, her balance steady despite the narrow path beneath them. "They know," she said softly, her voice carrying just enough to reach him without breaking the fragile stillness. Lucas did not look back, his eyes fixed ahead where the beam intersected with a larger support frame about 20 feet away. "Yeah," he replied under his breath. They stopped searching and started waiting. The realization settled between them, heavy and precise, like a line drawn in steel. Saren's gaze shifted downward for a brief moment, then back to him. "Then this is not escape," she said. "This is selection." Lucas's jaw tightened slightly at that word, but he kept moving, one step, then another, the rhythm steady, controlled. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe they just think we will panic and make it easy for them." Saren watched him closely now, not just his movement, but the way he carried the weight of the situation, the way he did not rush, did not freeze, simply continued forward. "You do not panic," she observed. Lucas exhaled slowly. "The sound barely audible. I did once, he said quietly. Did not work out too well. They reached the junction where the beam widened into a small maintenance platform, no more than 4 feet across, suspended above the dock like a forgotten piece of structure. Lucas stepped onto it first, testing the surface before turning slightly to face her. Saren followed, her boots making almost no sound as she joined him. The two of them now standing close in the confined space, the distance between them measured in inches instead of feet. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air felt thicker here, the hum of the station louder, like the structure itself was aware of their presence. Saren lifted her gaze to him, her expression no longer guarded, no longer distant, but something else, something clearer. You said you have done this before, she said. You said you have helped people walk. Lucas's eyes flicked away briefly, then back to her, the memory pressing closer than he wanted. Yeah, he said. Something like that. She stepped closer, just enough that her voice dropped, almost intimate, but still steady. And did you stay then? She asked. The question landed harder than anything else that night, heavier than the silence below, heavier than the unseen presence surrounding them. Lucas did not answer right away, because the truth was not simple, not clean. His hand tightened slightly against the edge of the platform as he looked past her, past the moment, into something that had not let him go. No, he said finally, his voice low, controlled, but carrying the weight of it. Saren held his gaze, not judging, not reacting, just understanding. Then this is different, she said. Lucas let out a breath he did not realize he was holding. Yeah, he admitted. It is. A faint sound echoed from somewhere beyond the platform. Not loud, not urgent, just enough to remind them that time was still moving, that whatever waited was still there. Saren turned her head slightly toward the sound, then back to him. You had the option to leave again, she said. You still do. Lucas shook his head. Once, small but certain. Not anymore, he replied. Saren studied him for a long moment, then slowly nodded, as if confirming something deeper than the situation itself. Then you understand, she said. Lucas frowned slightly. Understand what? He asked. Saren's gaze softened, just a fraction. That this is not about survival anymore, she said. Lucas held her eyes, the meaning settling in, shifting something inside him that had been locked away for too long. And for the first time that night, he did not look away. The platform felt smaller now, like the space itself had tightened around them. And Lucas became aware of every detail at once. The faint vibration under his boots, the distant hum shifting pitch, the subtle change in airflow that brushed against the side of his face like a warning he could not quite hear. He did not move immediately, did not reach for another path or another plan, because for the first time since this began, he understood that movement was no longer the answer. Saren stood close, her presence steady, her gaze fixed on him not with urgency, but with clarity, like she had already seen what came next and was waiting for him to catch up. This is where it changes, she said softly. Lucas frowned slightly, his eyes flicking toward the shadows beyond the platform, then back to her. Feels like it already did, he replied. Saren shook her head once, slow and deliberate. No, she said. This is where you decide who you are when there is nothing left to calculate. The words settled into him deeper than he expected, because there had always been something left before, another option, another way out, another excuse to step back. But now, standing above a silent dock with nowhere left to go that was not already seen, he felt that absence clearly. Lucas let out a slow breath, his shoulders easing just slightly, not in surrender, but in acceptance. You said this was selection, he said quietly. What does that mean? Saren studied him for a long moment, her expression softening in a way it had not before, something warmer beneath the control. My people do not choose partners based on status or strength alone, she said. We observe, we test, we wait for the moment when survival is no longer the driving force. Lucas tilted his head slightly, trying to follow the logic, but it felt less like logic and more like something else entirely. And this is that moment? He asked. Saren nodded. Yes, she said. When leaving is possible, but staying is chosen without expectation of reward. Lucas glanced past her again, toward the darkness that no longer felt like something to escape, but something to face. You think that is what this is? He asked. Saren stepped closer, closing the last inch of space between them, her voice dropping to something almost private. I do not think, she said. I know. Lucas held her gaze, and for the first time, he did not feel the need to explain himself, to justify his choices, to measure them against what he had done before. The past was still there, still heavy, but it no longer dictated the next step. A faint shift echoed through the structure, not loud, not threatening, just enough to mark the moment, like a door opening somewhere unseen. Saren's hand moved again, resting lightly against his chest, over his heartbeat. And this time Lucas did not tense, did not question it. He simply let it be. You stayed, she said softly. Lucas swallowed, the simplicity of it cutting deeper than anything else. Yeah, he said. Saren's eyes held his, unwavering now. Then there is nothing left to prove, she said. Lucas shook his head slightly, almost a reflex. Feels like there is, he replied. Saren's expression shifted again, not disagreeing, but acknowledging something more complex. For you? Perhaps, she said. For me, the answer is already clear. Lucas exhaled slowly, the tension in his chest easing into something steadier, something grounded. And what answer is that? He asked. Saren did not look away, did not hesitate. You are the one I choose, she said. The words did not echo, did not need to. They settled into the space between them with quiet certainty. Lucas did not respond right away, because for once, he did not feel the need to push back, to question, to deflect. He simply stood there, present in a way he had not been in a long time. And in that stillness, with the world waiting just beyond the edge of the platform, something shifted, not in the dock, not in the shadows, but in him. The hum shifted again, not louder but deeper, like the station itself had exhaled. And Lucas felt it settle into his chest as he stood there with her hand over his heartbeat. The space around them no longer feeling like a trap, but something else entirely, something paused, waiting. He glanced past her one last time, scanning the shadows below, the empty walkways, the silent dock that had been guiding them until now. And for the first time since this began, he realized nothing was moving toward them anymore. They stopped. He said quietly. Saren did not turn, her eyes still on him, calm, certain. They were never meant to take me, she replied. Lucas frowned slightly, the pieces shifting in his mind, not fitting until they suddenly did. Then this was not a hunt, he said. Saren shook her head once, a faint movement. No, she said. It was a measure. Lucas let out a slow breath, his shoulders lowering just a fraction as the tension that had driven every step finally changed into something steadier, something clearer. Of me, he said. Saren's expression softened, not with surprise, but with confirmation. Of us, she corrected. The word lingered, unfamiliar but not unwelcome, and Lucas found himself not rejecting it, not questioning it, just letting it exist between them. He looked at her then, really looked, at the faint glow beneath her skin, the steadiness in her posture, the way she had never truly lost control even when she appeared at her weakest. You could have handled all of this, he said. Saren did not deny it. Yes, she answered simply. Lucas nodded once, absorbing that, not with anger, but with understanding. So you wanted to see if I would stay, he said. Saren's hand pressed lightly against his chest, just enough to remind him of where it rested. I needed to know, she said. Because where I come from, that choice defines everything that follows. Lucas glanced down at her hand for a brief second, then back to her eyes. And now? He asked. Saren's gaze did not waver. Now I know, she said. Silence followed, but it was no longer heavy, no longer uncertain. It was quiet in a different way, like the end of something rather than the middle. Lucas shifted his weight slightly, the metal platform creaking underfoot, the reality of where they stood returning in small details, the distance to the ground, the dim lights, the faint hum that never truly stopped. So what happens next? He asked. Saren's expression changed, not colder, not distant, but more open, more real. That depends on you, she said. Lucas let out a faint breath, almost a laugh but softer. That is not how this usually works, he replied. Saren tilted her head slightly. It is how it works now, she said. Lucas looked away for a moment, not to escape, but to think, to feel the weight of everything that had brought him here, every step, every choice, every moment where he could have turned back and did not. Then he looked at her again, steady this time. I am not what you think I am, he said. Saren's hand did not move. You are exactly what I saw, she replied. Lucas held her gaze, searching for doubt, for hesitation, for anything that suggested she might be wrong. But there was none, just certainty, and something in him, something that had been broken for a long time, shifted quietly into place. He exhaled slowly, the tension leaving him not in a rush, but in a release he had not allowed before. Then I guess I do not walk away, he said. Saren's eyes softened, just slightly, but enough. You already proved that, she said. Lucas nodded once, small but real. The dock remained silent below them, the shadows no longer threatening, just distant, like something that had served its purpose and moved on. And for the first time in a long time, Lucas did not feel like he was running from anything at all. He stood there, with her, in the quiet space between what was and what would come next, and he stayed. Because this time, staying was not a mistake, it was a choice, and that made all the difference.